nerds. So, I'm going to explain Foucault's opinion that basically that capitalist governments exploit the social body for profit with power. So, in order to get into this first, well, obviously Foucault, those of you who don't know, he's my favorite 70s post-structuralist pervert philosopher, and I've been doing a series on his book History of Sexuality, Volume 1, which is an awesome book, but obviously Foucault was a notoriously pedantic and verbose writer, but I think he makes interesting points. He wasn't a very good writer at all. But anyway, so before we get into this, I'll explain like kind of what he means by biopower and anatomopower, which he uses in this paragraph. So these are kind of oversimplifications, but so biopower refers to various means by which modern nation states control their populations. In Foucault's work, it has been used to refer to practices of public health, regulation of heredity, like eugenics, basically, who gets to breed with who, and risk regulation, among many other regulatory mechanisms, often linked less directly with literal physical health. Or to put it more simply, it's the administration and regulation of human life at the level of the population and the individual body, rather. Various means by which the modern nation state controls the social body. So, yeah, I'll get into the rest of this as we go here. Okay, so let's get into the paragraph. This biopower was without question an indispensable element in the development of capitalism. The latter, or capitalism, would not have been possible without the controlled insertion of bodies into the machinery of production and the adjustment of the phenomena of population to economic processes. Oh, yeah, before I continue, I should clarify, as I always do, that Foucault, even though he might sound this way in this paragraph to some people, he was not a Marxist. He actually was highly critical of Marx, and just like Derrida, whose book I've been going over, called Spectres of Marx. He says favorable things about Marx at sometimes, but also is highly critical of Marx and ultimately rejected Marxism, and like both Derrida and Foucault did. But anyway, he's integrating this narrative about capitalism into his narrative about power. For Foucault, it's much more about power than capitalism, because you can see that he gets into various modern institutions. It's not just capitalism. He has a problem with government too. So he's more of an anarchist than a Marxist. But anyway, so the capitalism would not have been possible without the controlled insertion of bodies into the machinery of production and the adjustment of the phenomena of population to economic processes. But this was not all it required. It also needed the growth of both these factors, meaning both the growth of both the controlled insertion of bodies into the machinery of production and growth of the adjustment of the phenomena of population to economic processes. So basically, insert more bodies into the machinery of production and adjust the populace more to economic processes through methods of social control, basically. Um, so it needed the growth of both of these factors, their reinforcement as well as their availability and docility. It had to have methods of power capable of optimizing forces, aptitudes, and life in general without at the same time making them more difficult to govern. So you have to exploit the people, but still be able to control them just as efficiently. If you exploit them more, but you can't control them as much, then that's not going to work from, the authoritarian capitalist government perspective. Which, by which he means, like, he doesn't even use this term. I'm using it. It means like a combination of authoritarian capitalism and authoritarian nation states. But so anyway, okay, so he continues. If the development of the great instruments of the state as institutions of power, so yeah, we'll get into those. So institutions of power, like I've clarified many times before, he means basically modern institutions of the Enlightenment, basically meaning during the Enlightenment era in Europe from the 1600s to the 1800s specifically. In this paragraph, he's talking about specifically the 1700s, and he means like everything you could think of in terms of modern institutions. He means government, religion, science, and capitalism, and everything else. And he gets into more examples of that later. Okay, so if the development of the great institutions of the state as institutions of power ensured the maintenance of production relations, the rudiments of anatomo and biopolitics, created in the 18th century as techniques of power present at every level of the social body and utilized by diverse institutions, the family and the army, schools and the police, individual medicine, and the administration of collective bodies. I forgot to mention the difference between anatomo power and bio power. I'm gonna like massively oversimplify this, but basically, anatomo power is kind of an individual, like biopower on an individual basis. It's it's the power over the social, but like it's the power over an individual person. The biopower is the power over the entire social body, if I understand that correctly. I think that's like a massive oversimplification, but that's basically the essential difference: one person versus the entire social body. Um, so anyway, institutions of power ensured the maintenance of production relations, the rudiments of anatomo and biopolitics, created, and like I said, the 18th century, created in the 18th century as techniques of power present at every level of the social body and utilized by very diverse institutions. So he gets into more here: the family and the army, schools and the police, individual medicine, and then the administration of collective bodies. So all of these institutions: science, government, religion, capitalism, family, the army, schools, police, medicine, administration of collective bodies. Both of those are, like he said, instruments of the state. So he's criticizing government in particular here, the way government uses capitalism to control people as one of the instruments of power of this particular modern institution. Um, so anyway, they also acted as factors of segregation and social hierarchization, these modern institutions of power, exerting their influence on the respective forces of both of these movements. The modern institutions of power exerted respective forces on both the movement of segregation and hierarchization. So segregating people into their designated social classes and creating a hierarchy within society in terms of government and capitalism, like a hierarchy at the company where you work, a hierarchy in the government, of course, a hierarchy in terms of the way the entire social body or all of society is organized, right? Okay. So this guarantees relations of domination and effects of hegemony. So this means that the capitalist government hegemony can use domination to exploit the social body with the power of domination through for profit. Okay, so the adjustment of the accumulation of men to that of capital, reducing men to capital. So, reducing an individual person to profit, reducing all of society to the potential for the social body to earn profit. The adjustment of the accumulation of men to that of capital, the joining of the growth of human groups to the expansion of productive forces, and the differential allocation of profit were made possible in part by the exercise of biopower in its many forms and modes of application. The investment of the body, its valorization, and the distributive management of its forces were at time indispensable. Okay, so that's why it requires so much explanation, because he's so verbose and pedantic. But basically, in a nutshell, that's how Foucault is explaining that during the Enlightenment, starting in the 18th century or the 1700s, I should say, modern nation states in the Enlightenment, um, you modern capitalist nation states during the Enlightenment, I should say, used institutions, modern institutions of power like government, science, and religion, and created biopower in order to exploit the social body with the power of the modern institutions for profit. So, basically, this is all to Foucault. Modern capitalist governments of modern Enlightenment institutions not only dominate, but exploit the social body with power, all for profit, reducing all of society to our potential to earn profit for authoritarian capitalist governments.